Hey, so hello everyone, my name is Aaron Rout. This is Marcel. He's going to be our camera guy today, and he's going to be standing by me, and I wanted to do one on shavers. We've done one on the shavers in the past where Carl and Gordon, everybody's been out here, and we continue to get a lot of questions about the shaver, and so I just wanted to go through, do a quick webinar on the shavers, on features about them. We've changed our block quite a bit, so I wanted to be able to show that and also point out a lot of the facts and frequently asked questions and answers to those. Let me go through it real quick. So we have what's called the Snowie block. Sometimes that gets a little confusing because we have shavers that have numbers, and then we have our block shaver. And I just want to emphasize that we don't have different versions of the block, it's just one block shaver. So on our cube shavers, follow me here, so we have what's called the 1000, and the core purpose of the 1000, and as you can see, it's essentially half of the 3000. And the people who buy this mostly are people who have rental shops, and or people that have like an ice cream stand, or they have some other convenience store or something where they want to be able to add shaved ice, but shaved ice isn't their primary product. So they do a 1000. It has a smaller footprint. It's still easy, very easy to make shaved ice, and they can go that route. Come closer, and I want to show you inside here. If you look at the hopper size, this will hold 4 pounds of ice, whereas if we look at the 3000, that guy will hold 8 pounds of ice. And now it might be hard to tell. I'm going to grab this camera here real quick so you can kind of see the size of both. If you look at the channel on that 1000, it's much smaller, right, than the 3000. The reason I point that out is a lot of people will want to do business with the 1000, and they can do that. But if you have a big clump of ice, it's harder for it to make it into the belly of this guy, whereas almost anything can fall into this guy. I mean, as far as like clumps, if you have something that's huge, it's obviously not going to go in there, but you're going to break it past that point before you put it in here anyway. This one will do about 12 8-ounce cups a minute. This one will do about 18 a minute. So the speed is similar. The other disadvantage of using this one for a full-time business is that you're constantly filling the hopper. So when you scoop ice in, you shave that, it comes out quick, you make your product, and then you have to continually refill that with ice. Now I wanted to, so going over to the block, so this is our block shaver. Again, it doesn't have a number attached to it. This is a totally different animal. And the block ice shaver, these take cubed ice. If I didn't clarify that, these will take cubes, like this bag right over here. So those take cube. The block shaver will take this block. Now I've let these sit out. These are, when you let ice sit out, it's what we call tempering. So you can temper ice, or you can choose not to temper. Every shaver in the world is going to require that you temper ice, and really with ours, it's more of a preference on how you want to use the snow. It's not a requirement. You can use ice as cold as you can get it. In fact, we went and bought one of those laser temperature guns for this, and we came in here and went to shoot the ice and get the temperature off of it, and all it says is low. So we can't tell you how low it is. What I can do, like let's just look at this real quick. So if I shine in here, this is a warmer freezer, so that's showing me like 10 degrees, and this is still going to produce an awesome snow, but you always want it to be colder. I never did find out. I don't know if their low is 0, but we do know that this freezer is below 0. Our thermometer doesn't even read the rating on it, and so we get this ice as cold as we can get it. Did you read low on that?
Yeah.
So if we come over here, you can see how much of a difference tempering makes. So now our block has already achieved 30 degrees. Our cubes are sitting a little above that. They're about 32, 33 degrees. So So tempering makes quite a bit of difference. Now, the reason we do that is, like I say, it used to be that our shavers would stop. They would almost plug up if the ice was too cold. And the reason it's doing that is that ice is freezing to the blade, or the snow is freezing to the blade, and also to the channel where it's coming out. And it can build up and clog in that. That doesn't happen so much anymore. We've changed some things that kind of forces that out anyway. But there's still some management issues that you run into, where when you go to pack it, it's like Mother Nature. You go to pack really dry snow and it just won't, right? It'll just blow up. And that same thing will happen. It's so cold and so dry that it won't pack. And so you struggle with when you go to pack it and your top sticking into the cone topper and having that come out. The other thing that you'll run into is on that top, when you go to flavor it, the flavor will just run off the top. It's too dry to even absorb the flavor. It'll just run off the edge. But you have a wonderful snow, so you always kind of try to find a happy medium where you don't have any of those management problems of managing your shaved ice. If you warm it a little bit, then it comes out, it packs, and you don't want to pack tightly. You don't want to pack a lot. You're basically just forming that top. So anyway, so let me actually just kind of poke into. Actually, give me 1 minute. Okay. So this bag has not been tempered. And I want to bring that out because, well, look at that. Even in that freezer. So here, come on this cube. I don't know if you can see that, but really, actually, this is like a perfect cube. See how it's just barely turning glossy? Sometimes you can get cubes that are like, they're frosty white. And that is generally too cold. And again, the shavers will now shave it, but you still have a hard time packing and putting flavor on. So where it's like, it's just barely frosty, but you can tell it's just starting to turn glossy, that's a wonderful temperature for that ice, and to be able to manage that. So let's just go ahead and I'll show you how that works. So again, the 3000. So he's going to hold. Now there's a couple things that I did. He's holding 8 pounds of ice. Now a lot of times what I'll do at an event is I'll actually have another workstation drip pan, which is the tray that the shavers normally sit in, and I'll lay this down and I'll cut the bag lengthwise, and then I use a scoop. For the purposes of this video, I just tore the top and went into it. There's a reason I didn't go up to that tie. You see the tie here at the top? Yeah. You never mess with this. You always want this tie to be out of the whole process. I always, if I do rip a bag and I dump it like I did in this scenario, I will always make sure that I have that tie in hand, or I know it's out of the way, because if that tie makes its way into either one of these cube shavers, your blade's done. And that's shocking for people, and they think, well, even if it went through, it seems like it would shave a bit, and it won't. It shaves so fast, and it goes over those blades so quickly that it will dull every blade in this machine in a heartbeat, and you won't be able to use it anymore. So another reason also to have backup shavers. The other thing too is when you grab bags of ice, that a lot of times they're real solid, so you want to break them up, right? And so you always want to have a surface or something to break them on. And we even buy rubber mallets for ours, and we'll smack it with the rubber mallet. If you break it on the ground, then you add other things that can add to that dulling of that blade, like pebbles off the ground. You break your ice on the ground, a pebble's going to stick to the bag, you're going to dump that bag and a pebble fell in, it makes its way around the blade and it's done. So you want to make sure the only thing going in these shavers is ice. Okay, now let's go, well let's shave some. So this is an 8-ounce cup. So to give you some specs on this too, so this is an 8-pound hopper, as I've mentioned before. You should be able to get about 28 8-ounce cups from this hopper. Now what we have here, I don't know how big these are. We will usually use 20-pound bags, So there's a 20-pound bag right there. And I've already used a chunk of that, put that in there. But a 20-pound bag should get you about 84 shaved ice. I know Lyle's done some numbers. I'm looking over my shoulder at some numbers that I wrote down. But Lyle has that he gets about 60, and we feel like we get about 84. Now it also depends on how much you're putting on the top, how much you're packing, and things like that. So I'm going to go through that scenario here real quick. This is what we call a snow catch. A snow catch, or a snow guide, you wrap it around your cup and you bring it up. That keeps all of your snow contained, and so you're not wasting snow and it's not all sitting down here. And when you go to shave, basically that's about as far. So let's go, and this is pretty low, so let's bring the camera and tilt up over the top here, Marcel, or even look at this view right here. You can look at that. I didn't go very far, and then I can come down here and I can form this top. That gives me a top. Now that's very lightly packed. Once I start putting flavor on this, that snow's going to sink a little. So you could go a little more, and if you wanted, and that forms your top a little bit more. But as you can tell, I didn't pack a lot. We even have other videos where Mauricio, and he likes doing it, and people love the product that he makes too. But I never really make it that big. But he'll make it huge. And like that, for instance. And I just want to show you this snow too. That's coming from a cube shaver. Let me grab that camera real quick, just so I can see what I'm seeing. So I wanted to show you this too, because the snow that comes out of our machine is different than other shavers. Ours almost looks like a styrofoam. It's a little more like Mother Nature rather than a ribbon that you will get from some other shavers. So like, well, we'll talk a little bit more about that with the block. But I do want to get in here in the light, and it's hard to tell on video, but you'll see little crystal pieces that look a little shiny. See some of that? What that means is it's coming from cube. So you have about 95% pure snow, but because it's coming from cubes that have little edges, here, grab that camera again. But because it's coming from cubes, and let me add a note here. You'll always get a better snow the bigger and rounder the cube. Now these cubes are round one direction, but they're still squared off on the other sides, right? That's about the best we can do, unless somebody made a perfectly round cube. If you could make a perfectly round cube and have that go around that shaver, it would shave just like a block. So, but since you have little pieces that can come off these edges, every little piece that can make its way through the blade, and this is our blade here, every piece that can come through that isn't shaved and can make its way through that gap will be like a little piece. And so it adds just a tiny bit of crunch, but very little. You can actually get very, very close to block quality snow from a cube if you pay attention to your ice, if you get your ice as cold as possible and big and round as possible. But the nature of the beast is that cube will always have a teeny bit more crunch than a perfect block shave. Okay? So, and I was going somewhere else with it. Oh no, that was it. I touched it up. Okay, so, and going back to this guy, now what will happen too is you'll have employees, and for some reason it is human nature to just want to beat this to death. And people will pack this. I'll have employees, man, that they'll do this like 15 times before they pass it on. One, it takes too long. Two, you've now made a shell, and when you go to pour flavor on that, I mean, this just becomes hard and crunchy. So you defeated the purpose of even having a shaved ice machine. You could do a snow cone at that point, but that's not what we're about. So the way that you really want to do that, you want to shave just enough, just barely form your top. You have an awesome snow right there. Pour flavor on it, and this is wonderful. I don't know that I brought out flavor. I'll have someone grab some. We'll flavor them here in a little bit. Okay, so let's move over to the block. I'm going to grab a block right here. Okay, and by the way, I'm going to add a side note. If you want to ask questions on this live broadcast, you can do it through Twitter or Facebook. And the Twitter hashtag that you use is Snowie Live. So hashtag Snowie Live will get me questions. Also, if you don't have a Twitter account and you want to just do that through email or whatever, I'll go ahead and give you my email address now. And that's Aaron, it's AARON at Snowie.com. That's SNOWIE.com. So Aaron, AARON at Snowie.com. So feel free to ask questions over email, and I'd love to address those right now. Just want to throw that out there. And the cooler this is, the harder the bag is to manage. But I'm gonna... Now you see this one froze a little weird. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put that actually down first, and I'm going to shave that part out. Because just like with cube, you have little pieces that can make their way through, and if they can make their way through that blade, then you're going to get that in your product. So you want to be rid of that stuff. You want to make sure you're shaving from a perfectly flat surface. If you're going through the trouble of doing block, shave from a flat surface. Now there's a few things that we have changed with our... There we go. Sorry, I was going to trim off that top, but I just forced it in. Okay. So there's a few things that we've done that we've changed on the block. It used to be that at this point we would bring that down and hold that. You can still do that if you like. If you press your foot pedal, look down here on the ground more so. If you press your foot pedal, and let's come back up here. When I press it, it's going to bring down my foot. You see that foot moving? It is not running the blade because we have not closed the top. So when this top is open, it prevents this blade from spinning. Okay? So I'm going to go back up so you can see that. So you could come down here, and we have a speed control here on the side too if you wanted that to come down more quickly. And we'll touch on that here in a little bit. But you don't need to do that necessarily anymore. You can come down later. And it used to be on our other videos that we would, if you've seen them, you would, you're going to hear that block cracking, but you would have to slam it in place. We had pressure flaps that would have to bite into the ice, or we would try to prevent it from biting into the ice, and it was pretty difficult to get that shut. And now we don't need to do that anymore. If you notice when I do this, I'm closing that very easy. I didn't slam anything. I just close this very, very lightly, and it's done. And even if I have that foot pedal, our foot we call it, if I have that all the way up, and even if I start shaving, I am going to tighten this now though, and this is where we now get our pressure from, is we add the pressure later. Okay, so if you want to get a side view here, you can see that we're hugging that block now and keeping that from moving. Okay, and so now when I go and shave, that foot pedal is coming down, that foot is using that foot pedal coming down, and then it begins to shave. So I still have some of that even bad area, but if you look at that snow, there's not one crystal in that thing. That is perfect Mother Nature snow, right? That's wonderful, wonderful snow. But if we go back to it again, this is what I was going to talk about it. So, shaves from one 4-inch blade. And so it shaves what they call a ribbon. Ours, like I mentioned, even on this block, looks more like styrofoam. It's very, very fine and very fluffy, but it has a different texture. And the reason I bring that up is people will be used to that ribbon, and they'll be like, well, why isn't it creating the ribbon? And in that sense, the snowy block and the are apples and oranges. The will do that ribbon, but it will also take you minutes to make a shaved ice, where with our snowy block you could see how fast. In fact, let's make an 8-ounce cup here. And I even have this speed scale down. I can speed this up. And while I'm touching on that, also let me describe this. So you can change the cutting texture on a, right? So if you have an employee that wants to crank through it, wants it to go fast, then they could angle that blade to bite off more at one given time, and you could have an awful snow cone at that point, because it would be crunchy, it would be biting off too much and packing as well, right? So you want that to be like at a perfect angle. We've gone to places before where they're cranking through a line, and us knowing them, they knowing that we do shaved ice, will come up, and then you can see them go up, and they'll like scale back the blade so that they can make a nicer snow. But it takes a very, very long time to do that. And so our whole objective with them, like I'm saying, they're shaving from a 4-inch blade. We're shaving, if you look at this blade, we're shaving from about 178, I believe is the number that I counted, of inches of cutting surface at any given time. So it's shaving a lot. Now, it's not necessarily always hitting every one of these blades, because there's some pressure levels in here, and so that number might go down a little bit because of the contour of the blade, but that also gives you a longer life in the blade. So if you see arms under here, these are adding pressure to these areas, making them shave more than here. But the beauty behind that is, if you shave and it starts slowing up, you can actually remove the blade, spin that, put it back on, so now this is sitting here, and your pressure is now in three new areas. And you can do that 2 more times. So this blade almost has 3 lives to it. Okay, so going back to this one, it shaves the exact same way. And everything that comes out, and I'm making my way still through that bad area, you can see the pieces. But it's still, man, it's still making an awesome snow. I'm waiting for pieces to come out. But as a shaver sits, and I get this question a lot, well, what do you do when it sits for a bit? So there's 2 approaches. One is, people will, in traditional blocks and in other blocks, and even the one I've talked about that today, it's a little more difficult to pull it out, because you have to balance their block, you have to make sure that thing's centered. In other blocks that have they have that sharp blade, you have other shavers too, where they have other sharp blades that are on the side, and removing that block is dangerous. People get cut a lot, and if they're not careful. So when I had those shavers before we did this, and before we were Snowy, doing it way back when, I would just have them leave the block in. I'm like, I don't care. You can either just shave through it, get rid of it, or let it sit for the night and melt, and then come back in and put in a fresh block. And also when it melts overnight, it gets smaller, so it's easier to pull out. Well, we've made that very easy. You just loosen this up, and if you wanted to, if you have long breaks between, and your freezer is really accessible, then it's very, very easy to just grab that and go. There's no danger in removing that block and putting it back in at all. So anyway, it's nice like that. So also I want to show you the speed control. So if your block is down, and I didn't need to take that all the way up, but since I did, and I want to get that thing to come back down to there, instead of having to wait, I've got a speed control right here. Let's show this knob. We used to hide the speed control underneath here or under here. We did 2 different versions. We've now exposed it. The reason we expose this now is one, we wanted to hide it so that the employee, like I was telling you about on that other shaver, wouldn't change the direction of the blade and make a snow that you don't want. And we wanted to do the same thing with here, where you could hide it and they wouldn't be able to control it. But what we found is every block, every one of these blocks has its own, it's unique, right? And it will shave different than the next block that comes into it. And so really you need that speed control there, and you just really need to train your employees of making the perfect snow. And this one's fast enough that there's no reason to crank it up. We used to use shavers, they work on a clutch, and we was, as kids, and I'm going back to when I was like 12 years old, I would just crank that clutch and force it through as fast as I could so that I could move through the line. But it made a crappy snow. You can make a crappy snow with every shaver, and you can make a wonderful snow with most shavers. And so really what you need to do is be like, look, this one's fast already by default, so you don't need to worry about speed, just worry about making a perfect, awesome shaved ice. So I'm telling you that too. So if you wanted to speed that up, and I have that foot coming down, let me go back up to load, and you wanted to hurry and get down to your block, you could just press that. See how we're coming down slow? I could turn that up and get right up to it. Then I'm sitting pretty. I'm right there, right? And I can go back down, close that, tighten this up. And I always tighten it with the handle, and then I do a couple more little crinks there to make sure it's tight. I'm just waiting for that foot to connect the rest of the way. If you notice, that foot's not even touching it. We used to add pressure so that it would hold it while we were doing it, to be able to get that, to hold the block in place so it wouldn't bounce around. That foot's not even touching it, and that block isn't bouncing a bit. Now, going back to what I was mentioning before, if the shaver sits for a while, everything melts. And so I gave you one scenario where you could take the block out. If you leave it in, it's okay, you're still going to get a great snow. You'll get a better snow the colder that block is. But if it's warmer, then what we always do is kick out what's in there. So there's snow melting in here, there's snow melting along the shaft within the blade, and the block itself is getting more and more moist as time goes on. So what I always do is I'll get it and I'll toss just the first little bit that comes out of that. Now I'm back to some very dry snow, but if it was wet, I'm getting rid of that before it ever goes into a cup. And usually I don't do it with my hand. I actually do it with a cup, toss it aside, and then go back and make it. Now you look at that guy. That's seeing how I talk about just forming a top. I don't need to pack a perfectly round top. That forms their top. They get the idea that it's shaved ice, and you move on from there. You could do a little more just so they get a little more form. And this is still a cold block, but so now you have a little bit more of the form. But the more you round that and the more you pack it, the more this has the tendency to get a little harder, and you don't want to do that. But if you go into that snow, I mean, that's just flaking apart. That snow is awesome. Anyway, okay, so let's we'll flavor some. Seeing how I talk about that management? So I'm bumping into that a little bit where it wants to freeze to the top of it. And some people will actually put a straw in there, and that like shoves its way through. It's one way of kind of dealing with that. Or you can temper that block a little more. Deal with it being a warmer block a little bit, but you never run into that. You can just pack them and move them as fast as you can. Or you can just kind of play with it like I did a little bit. And normally you don't want to touch your product, but you saw me do that there. Okay. Let's see here. So you flavor that, and as you can tell, this is just absorbing that flavor. Greg and I did a video before where it was talking about the snow going through. So, and what I mean by that is, by the time you eat the top of this, the flavor is making its way down. When you flavor shaved ice, it sticks in the snow. That's how you know it's a good snow. It's not leaving that top at all. And you can eat it, but if I was to dump this upside down, I'm going to get my hand a little, I'll put it on top of some other snow. And you put that on top of there, you can see it has not made its way to the bottom. But it's continuing to make its way to the bottom. This doesn't mean that it needed more flavor. By the time they eat the top of that, it's going to make its way to the bottom of that cup. And that right there, it's like a very smooth, slurpy type texture. It's always hard to show what this is like on video, but I just want to point that out, that it's very smooth. You can't get much smoother than that. I wanted to shave from this one. So this shaver's been sitting the whole time, right? And those cubes have been getting warm, and you can even see that it's wet down in here. And that water is making its way out, but you're also going to have stuff that's sitting in there and it's getting harder. You never want that to go into a customer's cup. So, to give you an example of that, you can see how wet these pieces are, right? and I'm all ready to dry snow. I barely went through any snow or any ice before I got to where it is snow. And usually I do even a little more than that, but so I'll just toss that. So I'm back to a snowy product. Form my top a little bit. And I just wanted to show you this one as well, because I'm talking about shaved ice. People ask what the texture difference is. And see how it's holding on to that? That is a wonderful product. It's not dropping down to the bottom at all and leaving your top dry. It's very, very nice. Now when I talk about that like slurpy kind of texture, this one's a little bit different. With block you're going to have that perfectly, but you can see that I've got areas that aren't making it perfectly smooth, but it's basically there. I mean, this is when you're getting really picky and if you want a perfect snow, then you go with the block. If you want like pretty much perfect, and I'm talking like 95% of this product is smooth. Let me do this with a straw. And another way that we kind of do it is how easy it goes through the product. Look at that. It's not hanging up on anything. If I was to go like this and it stopped, then you know that that's a hard product and it's not good. But this is making its way right through that. That is an awesome snow. And it's actually becoming more of that texture that I talk about all the time. But very, very smooth. And so if I went back to this one, I just want to show you the contrast. A little more on there. And I flavor this one. Sorry, where'd I go with that? It's the same scenario, but you immediately go to like a very smooth texture. But as you can see, there's nothing hanging up on that, and I didn't put very much flavor. You can see, I mean, look at that. There's snow right beneath that. It's not leaving this top at all. That right there is a sign of awesome snow. So anyway, wanted to point that out. So now, some other things. So block, I didn't give the quantity of block. So what we're getting out of a block is about 35 8-ounce cups. So this is an 8-ounce cup. You get about 35 of those from this block. That helps you gauge what you're doing if you're doing a large event. Let's see, and usually you gauge it on an 11-pound block. Our shaver will take up to about a 6.5 by 7 by 12 inch block, and we also call that like an 11-pound block. And so off an 11-pound block, I actually have 40. It looks like 48 that they've gotten from that. So that's if you size it up and you get a bigger block than the average block. But all the sizes are different, and everything kind of plays its role in it and how much you get. So the other thing that I wanted to add before we go, and then I'll go back and check some questions real quick. But you have what's called compressed block and solid block. So what I've shown you today is solid block. We made that block ourselves. So what we had today was solid block. If you're buying from a supplier, sometimes you can get solid, but usually you get what's called compressed. And what a compressed block is they will basically dump this in a mold, and then they'll add water to it and refreeze it. And the problem with that is they usually don't use good ice. They usually use like really scrappy ice, like that. And what happens when you do that and you add water and you refreeze is it has voids and air pockets and pieces and edges that freeze throughout it. And then you end up having a snow that's almost like a cube anyway, right? And some of them I've seen really bad. In fact, I went up to a store to grab a compressed block here to show somebody, and man, it was the worst compressed I've seen. It was almost like they were using pebble ice that they had refrozen. It was like a slush block that had been refrozen. So it wasn't good at all, and you don't want to use anything like that. But if you get a compressed block where you can look in there and you can see that it's mostly whole cubes, then you can get a good snow from it. And I'm going to expand on that. Shavers, other shavers, they will kind of build up, they'll build some pressure, and or if they're a side feed, they'll build some pressure, and so when they're shaving and then all of a sudden they hit one of those air voids or an area that doesn't have solid ice, it's going to go and just make its way through it. So it'll be going and then it'll just be like and then catch up to another solid area. Well, everything that just came out of that is bad snow. You don't want to use it. Where ours on this, the way that our foot moves is it doesn't build up pressure. That thing is moving at a consistent rate. And the reason I bring this up is you can use a compressed block more with our shaver than any other shaver, because it will force its way to shave at a consistent rate and not power its way through a voided area, if that makes sense. So even though you're hitting some voids and you're having some chipped areas, it's not going to go and just crank through a whole bunch and throw out some bad snow. It's going to just make its way through like it should, and you'll still have some pieces in there, but not nearly as bad. Anyway, so a compressed block, it isn't even as bad as it used to be considered with our shaver, because you can make it work. Now, let me check some questions real quick. This one's from Nawaz. I'm still new to shaved ice, but for a newcomer, wouldn't the regular Snowie 3000 ice shaver be very sufficient? And would the block ice eventually take over the industry, especially since it looks like it is becoming more competitive? Okay, so it is becoming a more competitive industry. The block, the block can take over the industry, but the thing is the block is inconvenient. And to emphasize that, we made this block shaver and we featured it down at a show in Florida. And it took us, we were at the show for 5 days, it took us 3 days to find anybody who even made anything that resembled a block. And so it's not readily available. So if you're going to do block, it's competitive. You can make a finer, wonderful product, but it's harder to come by. And now if you make it, now you're in the business also of making ice and storing it and transporting it to your event. Whereas if you're doing an event and you had a Snowie 3000 and the event had ice there, an ice vendor on site that was supplying everybody, all you need to do is call that vendor and say, hey, we're going to be there, we need this much ice, and you don't need to worry about that part of your business at all. Now, the way that we gauge it, the way that I do, I shouldn't say we because everybody does it different, is if I'm doing an event, I will almost always take a cube shaver. And it's wonderful. Like I showed you here, there's not a huge difference. I mean, there's people that are connoisseurs and they'll notice a difference. But normally when we would bring people, if people were wanting a block, we would say, you know what, you need to fly here to Salt Lake and try our cube. And they would fly down and they would try it. They would always be like, good enough for me, and they would buy it and go. It's so convenient and it's so nice. It is a wonderful, wonderful shaver, and you can get awesome ice from it. Now, when you have them side by side and you can compare, you can see the difference. But if I was to show you this one, have you taste it, and then I had you come back a week later and try that one, you would, I'll bet you would have a hard time telling the difference. And there is a difference, but I believe that the general public would have no idea that there was a difference at all. And so I always take mine to events. If I need to move a crowd, I want ice to be convenient, I take the 3000 and done. I use it all the time. If I have a permanent location where I know people are going to be returning all the time to the same stand, so say I'm at a supermarket for the summer and people were coming every day. I mean, other scenarios change too, right? When I'm doing an event with a 3000, I'm giving them an option of 6 flavors that they put on themselves using a flavor station. Whereas at a supermarket, I have 80 flavors because I want them to have that choice every day, and I'm also giving them a premium snow so that they can enjoy that and they can come back to it all the time. That's how I do it, and I scale those. I use it like that all the time, where I bounce between the two. Okay, so I got a question here that says, why does my Snowie 3000 spit out slowly? changed the blade yesterday and getting a slow wet slush. So there's a couple things that happen there. One, we want to make sure that blade is new, and that might be a goofy answer, because you're like, of course I know it's new, but people will, and they'll throw in old blades and stuff like that all the time. The other thing is power. If you're running a very long distance, that motor is going to struggle. You're going to burn that motor more. That motor's going to get hotter. You're wearing on that motor more, but it's also putting out a different product because it's struggling to get it out. Now, if you're also using a very wet ice, so when you're saying you're getting a wet slush, that's all ice. That's the ice that's putting in it. It is impossible for you to put in a hard, cold, frozen piece of ice and get wet slush out. It won't happen. So if that's happening, your ice is far too wet. Now the slow thing, we would need to figure that out. Also, and I can almost tie that because our shavers are aggressive, and I mean the blades are aggressive too. So if you're putting in a very wet snow and you have very weak power, it's going to struggle its way getting through that. Your shaver's still going to shave through it, but if you had a cold, hard snow and you had significant power, man, that thing's going to rip right through it. So my guess is that's most likely your issue. But call us and we can talk to you directly about it too and see if we can troubleshoot anything more. Oh, I never did show a flower cup. Let me just show you that real quick. So we now have what's called flower cup attachments. We have some other videos on that as well. So this is a large one, and I don't think they brought me both. I'm sure there's not one under there. But we now, on our housings, we have a magnet on the back. Come and show this. Oh, I do have a couple other things. So we have a magnet on the back of the housing that's formed in with it. And so you can actually just pop that in place and now use a flower cup with it. And this is a large one, so it's giving you a big top on that. We have one that's scaled down and it'll give you a smaller top for a smaller cup. So if you're using one like this, that's too big for this size cup, so we have one that'll manage that size as well. And sorry, I'm glancing around for it. But if I was to throw this in here and shave, I'll show you the difference. So we don't use this, we don't use the snow guide at all now, because now we're just shaving right into this cup. And remember, I want to get rid of that snow on the bottom because that's going to be hard and it won't be tasty because it's all wet and slushy. And I'm shaving this. I'm making this top on it and I'm backing it out. I don't want my snow to ever go into this channel. Can you see that? I want to keep this open. If it goes back in here, then you start to have what we call bars, where bars are going to come out. And so if I wanted to make that big, I could, I'm trying not to pack it because I was going to go bigger, but let's say I just pack it right now. And I make a big top on that. That's awesome, right? And then I have a lot of questions that wonder how the DC works. So this is a DC shaver. I won't worry about throwing the snow in. But this is running off of that battery that you see in the back. So we have people ask all the time, how does it attach to a battery? Well, it's much like the battery in your vehicle. And we basically just attach it to it. You can bolt it to it, whatever, but all that's doing is just sliding on. Now this is not a car battery. A car battery is basically meant to discharge. It's not meant to discharge, and when it does a couple times, it's toast. You won't be able to use that battery after. What we're using is a deep cycle battery. A term we commonly use is a marine deep cycle, but it doesn't have to be a marine battery. It has to be a deep cycle battery. And it has to have 110 amp hours at least. And what that gives you is it'll let you run this shaver for 6 to 8 hours before you have to bring in another battery. So anyway, so the way that most people do it, and some people talk about running these in a series or parallel to be able to get more life, you don't need to do that. And you can do that and it'll extend, but what we normally do is we'll run it off of one battery and we'll have another battery that's charged and waiting, so that when this one dies we move that in and then we start charging that battery. and you can cycle them out. That's normally how we do it. In our vehicles, it's a different scenario, but we have like a constant charge that's going to those batteries and things as well. Anyway, so that's how it attaches, just so people can understand it. And I think that's it. Let me check questions one more time. So somebody asked, can you make one 6 inches wide and 10 inches high? And that's what I was doing here. If you want to be able to manage one that much taller, you're going to want to sweat your block a little more, so that it packs easier. I had that snow so fluffy that it was wanting to fall off the edges. In a live broadcast, I was asked if I could make one 6 inches wide and 10 inches tall. And Mauricio, being the king of the large tops, I'm going to have him show you how that's done.
That's your 10 inch. So it's way different when you have a tempered block to a cold block.
Bam! Look at that bad boy.
And look how it's not crunchy at all. It's all soft. It's nothing but still fine powder.
Sweet. There's no further questions. I hope this helps. I hope it answers a lot of questions that people have. And if they aren't all answered, then please feel free to submit your questions to us. You can email me at aaron@snowie.com. You can call Snowie directly. And we're going to be doing a webinar in 2 weeks. So not this next Thursday, but next. And we're doing these bi-weekly. So our next webinar will be on financing. We've got another financing company that is bringing in some neat things, and hopefully making it a lot more available to a lot more people. So we'll be doing that, and then the webinar following that, I believe we're doing one on that, what we make our ice in, and showing people how to do that, what we use, and go from there. So thank you for attending, and appreciate it. We'll see you soon.